Hello, I'm Daniela, and welcome to part 2 of the Tropical Leaf Slow Stitching series. In the first video, we made our selections for the fabric and the stitches we wanted to use, the various colors of floss. We created a basic stem, and in today's video, we're going to add the stem to our work. And this is where your piece starts to really take shape and come alive. Now there are lots of variations to this, but it's pretty basic, using just fabric and thread and just a few stitches. You can make this as large or as small as you like. All previous videos and videos connected to this theme will be linked down below, and you can join at any time. So let's get started on the second part in this series. So now in our second video, we're going to continue working on our Golden Pothos leaf. We're going to work on this stem. What I like to do is take this beautiful yellow thread here. This is 3078 from DMC, but basically what you want is just a light yellow, not a really warm color unless your fabric is warm. Just choose one that really stands out. What I want to do is feed in my needle, and I'm using 3 strands of floss instead of the one that we used to stitch that outline. I'm going to feed in my needle just as far in as I can go comfortably inside the end of that stem, basically to hide the knot. And whatever part sticks out, I'll just trim off a little bit. If a little bit sticks out, a little bit sticks out. That's okay. And now from here, I'm going to wind my thread around my stem, and I'll go 2 or 3 winds. I'll wind it around 2 or 3 times, and then I'm going to stitch through it, and that holds it in place. And then I'll just continue winding it around. You can wind it around fully and cover your entire stem, but I like to have some of that green of that stem coming through. And you can always, of course, go back and wind it further when you're done. I like that it enhances the variegation. You see a little contrast from the stem, the color of your stem. So I just wind it 2 or 3 times. And again, I'll make a stitch to hold it in place. And I'll continue doing this until I get to the area here where it meets my leaf. So now I'm winding as I get closer to my leaf. If you run out of thread, just knot it off and take another 3 strands on your needle. We're going to use a little bit of thread here, and we'll probably come back and add more to it because we're starting the veining. So if you get to a point where you have maybe 6 inches of thread left, you'll probably want to knot your thread and start it again. So now once you have your stem wrapped with your thread, you're going to want to come up with your needle. If you're coming with a new needle and thread, you'll come up this way. If you just ended your last wrap, you'll make your stitch, and then you're going to come up through your leaf and just make a couching stitch over your stem, just like this. Now right now there's a little bit of distance, so I'm just going to go back and stitch again, going back and forth. And if I get to a point where I'm too close to the stem and there's no leaf, I'll just wrap around, like right here. Just do a few more wraps. And stitch through the stem. And then I'll just come back over here. And I'll make as many stitches as fills in the area nicely. So now I'm going to continue with the couching stitch down the length of the stem, but I'm not going to make my stitches as wide as my stem. So what I'm going to do is make my stitches shorter and shorter, still doing the couching stitch. You can see it's kind of coming to a point just off the area where my stem ends. And then I'm going to create a line going down the length of that leaf. So I'm going to come over here and make my couching stitch. This is kind of a fake couching stitch because I'm not holding that stem in place. We held that stem in place with our stitching, which is kind of invisible because we did that in the last video where we held our stem in place with those little stitches. And now we're just making the aesthetic of making that stem come to life. So I'm going to just continue making these stitches back and forth, the length of the area that I sketched out that I want the vein to look like. If you space it too much, you can always go back and just throw in another stitch. Or you can just see how this looks. It's not perfect. You're not trying to get a perfectly stitched vein. You're just trying to imply that there's a vein, a leaf vein going on there. The key to remember is to make your stitches gradually get smaller and smaller as you go down the length of this leaf. You want your stitches to be fairly wide and just increasingly getting thinner and thinner, or shorter and shorter as the case may be. I like to keep going back and forth until I come off of this little fabric stem that we stitched down originally. Maybe just 2 or 3 stitches with this straight across, and then I'll start stitching a running stitch. Maybe one more little back and forth. And now I can start my running stitch. So instead of going left to right, I'll go up and down. And I like to start them a little bit longer. And then as I work my way down, they get just a little bit smaller. And this just really emphasizes the veining and how the veins become very tiny and fragile at the very edge of the leaf. Now this leaf in particular is quite long, so it just takes me a few more stitches. So I stitched right to the end of my leaf here. And this is the main vein. I can go back in there and really double that up if I wanted to, just to emphasize it. And I'll consider that. But for now, I'm going to stop here. This is what it looks like on the back of the leaf. You can see my line from my stem all the way down here to the base. So now I'm going to work on the major veining. With my very light yellow, I only want to do a few pieces of the veining, maybe 2 or 3 on each side. So I'm going to start on the right hand side and I'm going to follow this shape. So from here, I'm just going to go like this, kind of an inverted S. And then maybe I'll do one more like that and one more here. And then I'll do similar on the left hand side. I don't have to make it symmetrical and perfect. And I want to keep in mind that the stitches closest to the outside of the leaf are going to be smaller than the stitches closer to the center. So I'm going to make my first stitch over here, and I'm just following that line that I made. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm not doing a back stitch. I'm leaving a little bit of space in between each stitch. And in some instances, I'll leave a lot of space. I'll make it a little haphazard. But what I really want to do is make sure it's suggestive of a line, but not perfect. And then when I come right up here, I want my stitch to end just barely before that center line. And you see how beautiful that fades right into that line? That's what I'm going for. So I'll come up here and I'll start again. Now I'm starting in the center this time just because of proximity. I finished this little vein up here and it was closer for me to go here than all the way here. It's totally up to what you'd like to do. And when I start my threading, I'm going to start with a little bit larger stitches and work my way to the end with smaller stitches. Just gradually making them a little bit shorter with each stitch. You can leave a space and stitch 2 very close together and then leave a space. It's up to you, the dynamics you want to create here. You can also create back stitches if you want. I think it looks very organic with that imperfect spacing. The thing is, I really want to make sure that I do make my stitches a little bit smaller each time. So that's something I have to really be mindful of. Now, because I have so much room to go, I am going to knot this thread over here and restart again. You can, of course, just jump to over there, but I feel like that's a lot of wasted thread. So once again, I'll start up top here and make my stitches, again, following that rounded curve. So now I'm going to stitch 3 more pieces on the side here, but before I do that, I want to work on this one side. I'm going to take that green that we originally made for the outline, and now I want to make a little variation. So I threaded my needle with 6 strands of floss, and this is the 561. I want to stitch a few veins with this color. So I'm going to stitch one up top here, kind of following the shape we already made. I'm going to stitch one over here, and I'm going to have it come out and then just spread out. And then I'll just stitch one more here. I'm using the 6 strands because it's a chunkier look, and I like the way that looks. But you can vary it. You can use 4 strands or 5 strands. You can even stick to 3 if you want. I'm just going to make my stitches, again, following the idea that the larger stitches are closer to the center of this plant. And I'm going to stitch right over that fabric stem up to those stitches that we made. So I'll start with this outer one and then work my way down the length of this leaf. So now I've stitched everything on the right hand side onto the leaf. I'm going to match it, make it somewhat symmetrical on the left hand side. I'm not going for symmetry, but I'll make 3 yellow curves, and then I'll do 3 green curves. I'm not going to make them identical, but it'll be balanced. So I'll do that off screen, and then in the next video we'll start to fill in our stitches. It'll be really fun because we'll use our remaining 3 colors. So as you can see, our tropical leaf is really starting to come alive. The Golden Pothos leaf is taking shape. We'll continue to add stitches to this piece until it looks realistic. You can stop at any point as long as you're happy with the results. If you've enjoyed this video so far, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. Thanks for joining me today.